the first thing you're going to want to have with you when you go to put in your application is you need to know your community information. Mitigation plan, Eric went over that. You want to know that information, state and local. You also want to know your EIN, your DUNS numbers, your tax numbers. Some of this information, I think the CID, CRS districts, some of that's pre-populated in eGrants, so if you find your community in there, some of that will come up, but maybe be prepared to look for it in case it isn't in there.
Is that POC going to be your grant manager, or is it...
So the POC that I want you to put in there is the person, it has to be someone that I will work with that is a representative of the applicant. So a lot of times when people put projects in, I actually end up working with the engineering firm more than I end up working with the city point of contact. But anything official, letterhead I need from the city, because the city's the eligible and they're also kind of the responsible agency for the grant. So even if you're having your engineer do all the quarterly reports, send me all the reimbursements, be the person I talk to about the project, you're the one that if you get audited or anything happens, you're the one responsible. And you're the one that I'm going to need letterhead signed documents from. You're the one I'm going to give the grant award documents to. So it can be someone, whoever at your community or district is the one that's going to be talking to me and giving me those documents and signing the grant forms. So I can work with the engineer throughout the whole process, but there are times when I need the community to be responsive. So
don't make it your mayor.
Yeah, don't make your POC your mayor. Even if you decide you need to get documents signed by the mayor's never going to call me back. I'm not going to be able to get a hold of him or find him. Or so yeah, I need the gopher. Who's the gopher at your agency that's going to be like me that has to do all the work? So our director signs our papers, but I'm the one that types them up. I'm the one that puts them on the letterhead. I'm the one that goes and finds them to sign them. So, all right. Any questions about those? That's basically when you first get an eGrant to your application, you have to put all that information in. And this will be the information of the community that is applying for the grant. So you're the community or the agency that has jurisdiction over whatever project or plan you're doing. All right, plan and project titles. Eric and I discussed this a lot yesterday. Because when we're doing grants, if you walk into my office, I have a board on my wall that has probably 65, 70 grants on it that I have to manage between different programs. And it gets confusing because if you put a name in there that's like, this is going to be the, sometimes they'll put their name on there, but then it's like, this is our mitigation project. I'm like, well, that doesn't, what are they doing again? What is it? I can't remember, and then I have to get in FEMA's system and look it up, and I can't find who you are, and I relabel you on the board, and then it doesn't match what's in the system. So, some general guidelines for putting a name on your project or your plan. If you are doing a plan, the name of your activity or your project or your application, I'm trying to remember how they worded it in there. Titles, I think it's the title. What's the title of your project or the title of your plan? If you're doing a plan, it's your community name or the entity name and mitigation plan. That is the title. Saratoga Springs Mitigation Plan, Salt Lake County Mitigation Plan, UBAG, what I can't remember what the acronym stands for, Unabasin Association of Governments Mitigation Plan. All right, so example, some town mitigation plan or our county mitigation plan. That's all you put in the title. Some people like to get creative. I don't know if you think it's gonna, if it sounds better or it's gonna go out on a flyer, then maybe you'll get the money, but simple and short, to the point. If you're doing a project, it's the community or the location and the project-specific activity. So don't say Saratoga Springs or Salt Lake County Mitigation Project. Don't say it's a flood risk reduction project. That doesn't help me. I need to know, are you putting in a generator? And you just say, Saratoga got one this last year, Saratoga Springs generator. Great, I know exactly what it is. I don't have to open up the application. I know right what you're doing. We're putting in retention ponds. We're upsizing culverts. We're dealing with stormwater management. Something specific. And it can be either the community name, or in some cases, if your community does a lot of grants, you can do a location. Rick, with their landslide property acquisition, it was Truman Drive landslide, or Truman Drive landslide project. I knew right away, and Truman Drive's location, so it helps me distinguish, but when I see that on my board or in the grant system, I know exactly what you're talking about and what it is. Some communities put in multiple grants, so be specific about what project you're doing. If you're going to do the advanced assistance or the resilient infrastructure. That must be included in the title. So you would say, Salt Lake City Advanced Assistance Grant. And if you know what you're looking for, you could say Advanced Assistance Stormwater, if you're looking at stormwater. But you can even just say Advanced Assistance, because then we know that's what you're applying for. If you're going to do the resilient infrastructure, that has to be included in the title with the name of your community. All right, do not use, here's my do not. If you send me this when I do RFI or we review, I'm going to send you an email back and be in big red bold letters, change the name of your project. Don't use overly long, vague, or non-descriptive titles. So, like I mentioned before, this town's mitigation project, this town's flood risk improvement project. Or we have had some that we can't even read what it is because it cuts off the board, because it's like a newspaper announcement. Some town pre-disaster mitigation special project for improving risk reduction to, you don't need to say that it's a PDM grant. We know that it's a PDM grant. So it's like the teacher when they get mad because you didn't put your name on the paper and they send it back to you. Activity codes. This is another one sometimes we have a lot of problems with. We're going to put all this on our cheat sheet for you that we're going to send out to you, so as you guys sit down and go through, you know. But activity codes, so these impact sometimes what's asked or required on your grant application. Only choose one. We know sometimes you're doing projects that encompass multiple. So, sorry Rick, I'm going to use your example again, but their property acquisition was they were buying properties on a landslide, and then they were going to stabilize the landslide. Property acquisition is kind of the category that encompassed most of it. That was the main purpose of it. The landslide stabilization was part of it, but the property acquisition is what triggers a lot of the other stuff we have to do for the grant, and the requirements that are in there. And so you would just choose property acquisition, and then there might be some other stuff in there, but we know that it's there. But the main activity is the property acquisition. And then, you know, if you have questions, if you're unsure, if you see multiple things in there that you're not sure what code you should pick, you can always reach out to us and ask us, and we'll let you know which one's the best one to go with. If you're doing resilient infrastructure or advanced assistance, they have a specific code they want you to put in there. That is the code that you put in. And if you are doing advanced assistance, you enter it as a planning grant. So when you're at the beginning choosing whether you're doing a project or a plan, it's a plan, not a project, because project applications ask a lot more questions than the planning ones do, that won't be relevant on the advanced assistance. So you won't be able to answer a lot of the questions if you choose project, and they probably will reject it. So we'll put these codes out with the cheat sheet guide we're going to send you, so those will be on there, so you'll have them when you do the application. When you pick that, anything you click in here triggers what populates in your, or what's required in the application. And if you pick 2, then you have to split your budget items between those 2 codes. And it, like you said, it just makes it so much more complicated. So just pick the one that's the most applicable, or the one like with property acquisition that has the most requirements to make sure you get all the information in there. With a property acquisition, if you don't have all that information in there, they will reject the application. So if you chose the wrong code and didn't enter all the property information they wanted or all the requirements, then they'll reject your application as incomplete. So, like we said, ask us if you have questions on your project. All right, scope of work. So this is the scope of work you put in for a plan. And sorry there's a lot of text up here, but this is when you go into eGrants and you're putting in your scope of work. The first question they ask on this one, well, more on project, is they're like, provide a clear and detailed description of your proposed activity. Or some of these, you know, if it's a plan, describe the process. A lot of people, that first question, they put everything in there. The history, all the stuff they've done in the past, why they chose it, what they're doing. And then you find later as you click through that you have to re-answer all those same questions again, because all they wanted in that first box was a detailed but precise, what activity are you doing? We are going to build a debris basin. We are going to update our plan. They don't need all the background because you're going to answer that all in separate boxes as the page goes on. In eGrants, it shows you kind of like one section at a time, so you see this and you don't know there's 20 questions to follow. So for a plan, they're going to ask you to describe the geographic area. So you're going to have to say it's this county, list the cities that are included, or it's a multiple county. What's the geography of your plan? If it's an update, and this is only if you're doing an update. If you already have a plan, you don't have to answer this, or you're doing a new plan. is they want to know the evaluation of your current plan, because you are updating it. They want to know, have you looked at it and said, well, we should change this, it didn't work very well, we should add this because it's a better way to do it, these strategies weren't very good. So they want an evaluation of your old plan and what changes you're going to be making. It can't just be that you go in and change the date. We've gone in and we searched for all the dates and changed it from this year to this year and we're good to go. You have to evaluate your old plan about what changes you want to make. And then describe the process of implementing the planning activity. Eric will go over with, like you said, he'll give you an hour-long training on how to do this. But you just have to describe how you're going to do it and what you're going to do it. We're going to form a committee, we're going to reach out to these communities, we're going to have meetings, to do this stuff. Kind of maybe your timeline, how you're going to do your plan adoption, how you're going to maintain the plan over the years. And it doesn't have to be, a lot of this you'll figure out as you go. When you're creating your plan, you get more detail. But this is kind of an overview of how are you going to approach this. They don't want to give you money when you're just like, oh, we're going to update it, but we don't really know how we're going to do it or how long it'll take or who we need to have involved. And then your primary sources of information and data, they want to know that you're updating your data. You don't want to keep using the same data from 20 years ago. There's new stuff that comes out, new things that have happened. So what data are you going to use? How are you going to get it? And then what staff and resources are you going to use? Are you going to hire a contractor? Are you going to do it in-house? Who in-house is going to help you? And that's what you need to put in the scope of work for a plan. We also ask that I'll provide these questions, so what you can do is you can plan on answering these questions throughout the eGrants process. You'll know what questions you have to answer. And we also ask that you write this up on a Word document. So I'll talk about this later, but you have to attach a Word document in eGrants. A lot of these sections, the scope of work, mostly budget and timeline. You're only putting a little table of information in there, but in order to get the grant and to give us information, you need to provide all the backup. So you're just going to tell us construction's going to cost $600,000. You're not going to break it down by what each part of construction is, but then you're going to attach a Word document that shows how you worked out that $600,000 or the breakdown of the costs. Same with scope of work. FEMA's eGrant system is great for uploading information when we do the applications, but if you need to do a scope of work change later, we can't make changes in the system. So we need to keep a workable document on file where we can go in and make changes and updates to your scope of work as you go along. So it's really important that you attach those things and keep that in mind. So you can type up your whole application in Word and then just copy and paste it into eGrants and then send us the Word document as well. All right, scope of work for a project. There's more questions in here and a lot more information depending on what your project is. So first thing, identify the hazard to be mitigated. It's a click box, and you can click multiple. You can say we're doing flood and fire, or all that has a whole long list of hazards that you're mitigating. Click all the ones that apply. First question, provide a clear and detailed description of your proposed activity. That is the activity, not the history, not the reasons why, not the other things you looked at, but like we are building a retention pond in this location. We are retrofitting these 3 schools. And so give the details of the activity, the actual project. And then after they'll ask more information. Tell us where it's located. Describe the activity and why you should do it. Who's going to benefit or be impacted by this? How will the mitigation activity be implemented? How is it technically feasible? Will it be effective? Who will manage, and that's where you're going to include all your engineering stuff. This is how it's feasible, this is the technicalities of it. Describe all that. Who's going to manage and complete it? Will the project address the hazards identified and what risks will remain? When will the mitigation activity take place? And when you say that activity, you don't have to give us exact dates. When we get to the schedule, you're not going to say we're going to start in April of 2019 because we don't know. As we mentioned, we don't know when you're going to get the grant, but put things in there like we have to do construction over the summer because we're in northern Utah and our construction period is between these months, and it will take 2 summers to complete this, and so we'll complete it within 24 months of when the grant is awarded. That's the kind of information we need in there. And then explain why it's the best alternative. FEMA's going to come back and ask, is there a better way to do this? Did you look at all the options? You'll say why it's the best. It might be more expensive, but it's better because it prevents more risk, it addresses things more. One that you have to put in there as you list the other things you looked at is you must put we looked at what would happen if we did nothing. So make sure you put a line in there about that. If we don't do anything here, this is what's going to happen, and this is why we have to do something. So one of the alternatives is do nothing. And then identify the entity that will perform any long-term maintenance and provide a maintenance schedule and cost information. FEMA asks for this information because they don't provide funding for ongoing maintenance. They provide the funding for the project, but not for the continued maintenance. They want to make sure that if they give you the money for this, you're going to be able to maintain it going forward. Otherwise, if you're not maintaining your defensible space, if you're not maintaining the retention ponds that you put in and you let them fill up with sediment, then it's a waste of money and it's not cost effective.
Is it beneficial in this narrative to include like references to if you have like a big engineering report that you're going to
Yeah.
add, include case numbers?
So yeah, so when you describe how it's technically feasible, like that question would be like, well, we did this study and these are the results, and you can just paraphrase, you don't have to put all the data in there, and just say see attachment C, and then you're going to attach your engineering study as attachment C. So all throughout after each question, they say you can attach things for each question you've answered. So there's things all throughout, and there are certain attachments that they will say attach this specific document here. Other ways, it's just open for attach any attachments here. So yeah, make reference to, you don't have to quote all the studies. You can say, oh, we did a study, and here's a paraphrase of the results that came out. For more details, see this attachment. So, and that would be the place just to list that you have done all that stuff. We've done the studies, we've done the engineering, we've looked at all our alternatives. So just make sure that first answer of that question is, this is what we are going to do and what the money's for. And then you'll get to answer all those justification questions afterward. All right, so timeline schedule. So they give you a million options when you get to this in eGrants. It says, what is your timeline and your schedule? There's a narrative that goes with this. So like I said, when you answer that question, how is it going to happen, when it's going to happen, that's when you say, well, we know it'll take 12 months of construction, and it'll depend on when you give us the grant, and we can only do construction in the summer or whatever. Write your narrative out. When you put stuff in here, make it simple. You don't have to outline every single thing that you're going to do. This person's going to write up the bid, and that's going to take a week, and then this person's going to put it out to bid, and it'll take a week to be in the newspaper. Just be broad. You can say, we're going to do the engineering starting, and so the starting point is the starting point in the grant process. So you have 36 months to get stuff done. We will tell you, give yourself that full 36 months. We'll give it to you. That's not going to affect whether you'll get the grant or not. Don't say it's going to take you 5 years, because FEMA wants you to be able to do it within 36 months. But say, oh, we figure engineering will take about a month, and that starting point is after you're awarded the grant. So within the first month after getting the grant, we're going to do more of our technical engineering. And we're like, oh, that'll take about 3 months to do, and our engineer's going to do it. And then you say, well, we got to get our contract. So that'll probably start about the 3rd month, and that'll probably take a couple months for us to get that all together. And then this is the person or the agency that's going to do it. And then be like, construction. We're going to start 6 months after we get the grant, and it's going to take, it might only take you 12 months, it might only take 18, but you can put in there, it's going to take, we'll give ourselves 24 months to get all of the construction done. And our contractor's going to do it. So keep it simple. Don't try to, and when you do stuff up here, it will say, you can choose weeks, you can choose days, you can choose years. Don't overcomplicate it for yourself. Broad categories. We're going to start this month. 12 months after we get the grant, we're going to start this, and it's going to take us about 12 months. That's all you need to put in there. And then give us some more details in your narrative. The narrative is not provided in eGrants. It is required, but it's not provided to write it in eGrants. It's just this table. So that's something you want to put in your Word document. Copy of the table, and then say, this is what we're going to do. We can only do construction in the summer, so that will affect your timeline. Put those little things in there so we're aware of that. It makes FEMA aware of it, because then FEMA knows if they don't award the grant until like November, well, you're not going to start construction until May or whenever the snow clears up. So that's just good information to have if we have to do a time extension. So yeah, 4 or 5 steps for your plan. Make sure, even if you don't put it in here, you need to be aware that there is a lovely closeout process at the end of the planning. So give yourselves that window, because that takes a while to get, especially adoptions at the end of a plan. You can't think, well, we're going to finish writing the plan a month before the period of performance, because you're required to have all your communities adopt the plan. And as you know, working with politicians and community committees, it can take a while to get on their agenda and to get things formally adopted. So make sure you're aware of that you're going to need that cushion of time at the end. So budget estimate, this is the one that I have the most headaches with. The one I often have to come to you guys later and say, we need to submit a formal request to FEMA to revise your budget. So when we do reimbursements, when you send me your reimbursement form and say, I want my money back for this, I have to reimburse you based on the categories and the amounts that you put in this table on e-grants. And if you're too specific and you have too many items and you're $1 over here and $3 under there, I have to submit a budget revision request to FEMA to move that money around. So don't tell me how much you're going to spend on nails. Don't tell me how much you're going to spend on plywood. Give me a lump sum that says construction. That's all the employees that were paid, the materials that went, anything related to construction is its own category. So this is an example of a community, and we try to fix this before you guys put the applications in. But as we mentioned, I'm juggling 65 grants, and we review it. I say it's a problem. We send you the information, say send it back, and then you get back in e-grants and fix it. And unfortunately, sometimes we'd always get back in there and make sure it's been fixed before FEMA officially sends it out. And it's like, oh, we told them to fix the budget, but they got asked to do 500 other things too, and the budget got lost in the fixing of everything. So then the grants have formally been awarded with the really crazy budget, and then we have to do a whole formal letter process to fix it. So this is an example of one I got. So it's a stream restoration project that they were doing. And this was one that was just that. We went to fix it during the RFI process, but it somehow got overlooked, didn't get put in with all the other 500 questions FEMA was asking. And we noticed when we went to go give the award that the budget was not what it should have been. So they had to hurry and do a letter. So this is the original budget. I'm sorry it's blurry. I had to copy and paste from PDFs and I couldn't get it to show up correctly. But you see there's a lot of line items in there. There's way more than there needs to be. And it's broken out between 2 different sites and between probably 6 and 7 different activities at that site. When I go to reimburse that, if you spent more on this and less on that, we have to send all these budget revisions in. So this is what we changed it to. Basically, these are if you're doing a project, these are the categories that are eligible for reimbursement. I'll talk about that on the next slide a little bit. But we reduced all of that, and they also had a contingency line in there for each site. FEMA does not allow funding for contingency. Now, you can put that contingency in your construction line or your engineering line. You know, you're estimating, this is an estimate. You are estimating how much it's going to cost you. So you can give yourself a little wiggle room for some contingency, but you can't specify it as a line item. So we took all those out and condensed them down to these 6 lines. So, and they have construction as the top and plantings. They could have put plantings in construction because they were revegetating along the stream bed after they fixed it. They could have put plantings in construction. We would consider putting plantings in as part of the construction. So they could have condensed those 2 together as well. And then there's engineering, project management, grant management, and pre-award costs. And I'll talk a little bit about that, pre-award costs, in a second. So then when they submitted it to me, they had to submit this to me and say, this is our old stuff, this is all the stuff we're crossing out, and this is all the new stuff we're putting in. So that's how they kind of had to convert their budget down. All of this information, the big tall one, you want that in your Word document that you give us. We need to know how you came up with, $600,000 for construction. FEMA wants to know how you came up with that number, and that's where you put this detail breakdown is in that Word document. But when you're entering those into e-grants and those line items, you only want those 5. Because what's in that e-grant line item is the category I reimburse you on. And you can even say in the narrative, because you have to write out like a little bit of a paragraph about your budget and how you came about it, how you figured stuff out. Oh, we got some bids, or we've done these projects before, so we know generally how much it costs. Or we're using in-house materials, so we know what these are. I mean, you can put in there, we put these in and we estimated it will cost us about this. Because oftentimes you don't know. You have to go get a contractor later, or you don't know until you actually do it. But this is what your grant is going to be awarded on, is your estimate. So you want to be as accurate as you can. So make sure you've done the background work and try to guess. But make sure those line items are simple. Otherwise, it's a lot of back and forth between us later with letterheads and signed forms and things to FEMA, and it takes weeks, and then your reimbursement's delayed. And we can do it, but it's a lot easier if we just do this at the beginning. So contingency costs, as we mentioned, it's not allowed. Make sure they're absorbed into the categories themselves. Engineering costs. So your engineering can be up to, and this is one of those vague things that FEMA just tells us. We can't ever find an official number anywhere. But if it's under 12%, they usually don't question. If you give us a budget where your engineering costs 45% of your project, they're going to question that. They're going to say, well, why is the engineering so much compared to what the project is? You can submit it with the higher engineering costs, but you're going to have to justify why it's so expensive compared to the cost of the project itself. And then pre-award costs also include things like the environmental, some of the engineering studies, environmental studies that you're going to have to do. Those fall under engineering. It's not just the salary you're paying the engineer. It's the studies. It's all that stuff that goes into engineering. Administration, pre-award costs. I don't want to skip that. So pre-award costs, you can put a line item in there. Often what we find out, especially if you're doing a project that requires a lot of EHP or a lot of studies at the beginning, FEMA will cover those costs. But your budget, if it doesn't say pre-award, only starts from the day you get the grant awarded. Pre-award costs are from the time the grant period opens until you get your grant awarded. So if you have to do an endangered species study on the land before they'll award the grant to you, and Rick knows, he's done a lot of these down in southern Utah, that cost can be reimbursed, but it needs to fall under the pre-award category. Once it's awarded, you can't change the amount. So as you're thinking about this, think, oh, we're probably going to have to do some environmental studies. We're probably going to have to do some of this stuff during the application process. Put that pre-award line item in there and make that part of your budget. Because if you do it later, you're not going to get any extra money for it. You're going to have to take the money out of other categories. Administration costs. So you can claim management costs if you want to. And that's for project management and grant management. That can be up to 5% for grant management and 10% for project management. And that's the percentage of the whole cost of the project. I've had some grants that they put this in here and then they realize their construction costs them more than they thought it would, and they're like, well, we'd rather get the money for the construction, we'll just eat the management costs. And so we redo their budget so the management's out of there. But if you want to put this in there, you can. Grant management is all the things you have to do talking to me. Anything you do to manage the money and the grant. Project management is all the stuff you do to manage the project. So the stuff that you would do to get the project done even if you weren't working with us for the money. That's what the project management is. And they do have the caps of 5 and 10%. So like we said, combine all like items into one category line, so i.e. construction. Try to be as simple and broad as you can in some of those categories. All right, so match. We talked about this before, but when we get matches in there, sometimes I get that it's like this grant match, and you put the dollar amounts in there, and then the math comes out to this is 74.99999% federal match. That is horrible when it comes time to reimburse, because we have to match exactly what you've said in there. And it can be, we've had people that have had to send us checks back for 4 cents. We've had things we've had to send money out for 45 cents. FEMA's really strict. We have to be down to the cent and the dollar. And they tend to round up in their paperwork. So if you can, when you're doing your budget and you're figuring out how much your grant is, just look at the math. When you put it in, how much does it calculate out to? If it comes to 74.9999%, maybe round it up 50 cents or $1 so that the percentage comes out to an equal percentage match. Because when we reimburse you, if you spent less than what your project was, we reimburse you still 75% of what you spent. So that's just something to look at. Try to keep your percentages to whole numbers and try to keep the dollar amounts rounded. If you do the math and you think, well, it'll cost $102,000 and 45 cents, well, I'll just round up to $102,000 and $1 instead of the 45 cents. All right, BCA. We're almost done with this section. We can take a break. I guess maybe it's lunchtime. So when you do the BCA, whoever does it, whether you do it in-house or you hire someone, they have to use the latest FEMA BCA methodology. They're constantly changing this as they get new projects that come in. The BCA calculation is different depending on if you're doing a flood project, if you're doing a fire project, if you're doing an earthquake project. They have different calculators for that. FEMA will provide the BCA software. You have to use the most current version. If you use a non-standard value, so they have all these formulas in there and you click on a box. If you have something that doesn't fit and you have to put some different valuations in there, you just have to put your justification in, or your engineer or whoever you hired to do it, about why they had to change some of those things. And then when you put the number on eGrants. When you get into eGrants and say, what is your BCA? And you write in your BCA number. But you also need to attach the full export file of the whole software results. So make sure you attach those, because we get a lot of people that put the number in and then they forget to attach the detailed results. And then FEMA comes after you later to get that. So, and they go through how you did it, because they'll say, oh wow, this is like a really high BCA. They'll want to look at the details of how you got to that number, make sure you didn't make a mistake or put the wrong calculation in or over justify something or miscount something. And then DEM, we will reimburse you the cost of the BCA. So I guess if they apply, they do the BCA, but they don't get selected, it won't be an out-of-pocket cost for you to do that BCA. That is something, we don't have you money for match, we don't have money for other things, but we will cover the cost of the BCA for you. Of course, up to a reasonable amount, so don't let your engineer or whoever it is charge you 3 times what it should be. And then we do have a list of people that do BCAs, they have experience, so if you don't have anyone, you don't know anyone, we can't recommend anyone, but we can give you a generic list of, we know these people have experience doing it, you can shop around and ask them. So assurance forms. These are forms that you need to upload so we're done with you have to click and type and enter into eGrants. Unless you're doing a acquisition project and then there's a million more things you have to put in there, and then talk to me and I'll tell you what those things are. But assurance forms. So these are forms that you have to fill out and upload. Everybody has to do it. In eGrants, there should be links that go to these forms. So you click on the link, you go to the form, you fill it out, you upload it. The links don't always work. So we're going to provide this on our little cheat sheet as well. You can just type in the name of the form and the number and FEMA, and it should take you to the PDF. If you Google it, it should take you. If not, contact us and we can help provide the most current links to the most current forms. FEMA is not always the best at keeping those links updated. So fill all these out and upload them, as well as extra supporting documents and attachments. So when you do your location, you're going to need to know the lat and long. You're going to have to upload location maps. When you describe your geographical area, FEMA wants to see a map of what you're talking about. A floodplain map, so you have to say whether the project is in a floodplain or not, and then you have to show your maps showing where those floodplains are and that you're not in a floodplain or you are. And then site photos. So oftentimes they want photos of the building you're retrofitting or the site that you're going to be fixing. So have those ready to attach. For EHP, you have all these agency letters. You're going to be going back and forth. Amber will go over this in detail later. You're going to go back and forth a lot with other federal and state agencies covering all your environmental and historical stuff. And so you'll have copies of letters you've sent back and forth and approvals, and you're going to need to upload those things. Costs, you have to upload your match letter. So you're going to pay your 25%. You have to put in there in your match how you're doing, like we're going to do cash, we're going to do forced account labor, however you're going to do it, and then you have a letter saying we're going to committed to paying this much of the match and this is how we're going to cover that cost. And on letterhead signed by the official people. Upload your BCA files. Acquisitions, like I said, lots of stuff, ask me if you're doing an acquisition project. Engineering planning, make sure you upload all your drawings, your plans, your studies. If you're doing a mitigation plan, you need to upload your participation letters. So all the communities have to send a letter saying that they're going to participate in the plan. And then the Word document that I mentioned, that's all the stuff that you put in the application, write it up in a Word document, submit that Word document to us. So those are the things you're going to need to put on there.